Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So in other words, how we spend our money or how we handle our possessions reflects the condition of our hearts. And that's why this was a repeated theme. So for so many people in life, their purpose is found in what they have, not in who they know. And for us as God's people, our value, our identity is not in the car parked in my garage. Wish I could get a car in my garage. It's never happened since I moved into that house. One car garage, and it's, you know how it is, it's the storage shed. And so, it's not the car in my driveway. It's not the house. It's not what I have. It's who I know. Why? Because at the end of the day, I've been by many bedsides and no one has ever said, bring me my car keys. No one's ever said that. No one's ever said, bring me my awards. Bring me my varsity letter. Bring me my Cincinnati Bengals paraphernalia. No one's ever said those things. You know what matters? Well, what matters is what they've done with Jesus Christ. That's all that matters in that day. So let's consider this great danger in our text under two headings. Number one, the problem of money, and secondly, the proper perspective. Notice verses 8 through 17, first heading, the problem of money. And at the beginning, let's just say it's really a heart problem. I mean, money itself is not a problem. Money doesn't have a mind or possessions. If I'm walking in a car lot, a car didn't go, hey, over here, buy me. It doesn't do that. No one twists my arm. The problem is my heart. And the problem is multifaceted, and we're going to consider that problem in these following verses. So what do these teach then about the problem of money? Notice first verses 8 through 9, oppression. Verse 8, the oppression of the poor. If thou seest the oppression of the poor and violent perverting of judgment and justice in a province, marvel not at the matter. For he that is higher than the highest regardeth, and there be higher than they. Now, this is a very difficult phrase in the Hebrew. These two verses are very difficult. Some lean to what is being said here, that when it's a reference to higher than the highest and higher than they, it's a reference to this multi-level of officials that exact their pound of flesh on everybody down below. Others believe that the reference to he that is higher than the highest is a reference to God, and there be higher than they, and this is just a double emphasis, emphasizing man's accountability to God. Certainly what is evident here is that there are those who have power and they oppress the poor. Money and power go hand in hand. And there is futility, beloved, in man's governing, because the ultimate problem is a heart problem. We have to be careful of attaching ourselves in our faith. We have a responsibility as citizens of a nation, and a wonderful privilege in a representative type of government, that we can actually vote. Some places in the world, they don't have that privilege. So we ought to take advantage of that. But we also ought to recognize, no matter what ilk, we ought to vote, I believe, biblically, according to a biblical worldview, and how we believe Christ would have us to vote. But we also have to understand this. We are voting for fellow sinners. And I believe sometimes the church saddles itself to a political candidate and can ride the waves as, he's the greatest thing in the world. I remember somebody invited me this last senatorial thing to go, and it was pastors in the area. And I remember this pastor was telling me, he said, I remember back when so-and-so ran, and I championed him and did this. But this guy really, and I'm like, do you hear yourself? I mean, you were just as passionate about this guy, and he let you down. Now you're passionate about this guy. Here's a news flash. He's going to let you down too. You know why? Because only Jesus Christ won't let me down. But he'll fail me. Why? Even in the integrity of his heart and his best efforts, he's going to fail. Why? Because he's got feet of clay. Even if he has a heart for God, he's got feet of clay, and he's a sinner in need of God's grace. So we recognize throughout the scriptures, it tells us the problem with man's governance is a problem of the heart. Spiritually dead people are corrupt and they're self-serving. But notice in verse 9 it says, moreover, the profit of the earth is for all, and the king himself is served by the field. So all are dependent upon God's providence. God's providence in what? In the earth and in the field. And so all are dependent upon his providence, and thus all are accountable to him. So there indeed is a higher than the highest, and that's God. And so are we going to see oppression in this world? Yes. Will people oppress for money and for power? Absolutely. But we recognize this, there's an end to this. And the end of all this is Jesus Christ. He's the lover of our souls, and he's on the throne. And so what does it tell us? Hebrews chapter 4, it says, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. So God sees it all. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good, and certainly oppression on the basis of the greed of those who are officials. But notice also there is no satisfaction. Another problem of money, no satisfaction. Verse 10, he that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This also is vanity. There's no satisfaction. And now recognize, what is the problem here? It's the love of silver. It's the love of abundance. It's not the silver's fault. It's not the possession's fault. It's the loving of those things. We're reminded of 1 Timothy chapter 6. For the love of money is the root of all evil. There's an affection problem, where one's heart ought to be affectionate for Christ and the treasure that he is. It sets itself upon that which cannot deliver or satisfy. Wealth can be intoxicating. Why is it intoxicating? Because what is the big problem we have as human beings? Remember back in the garden? Remember, she sees the tree, and remember the levels of temptation, going back to 1 Timothy, or rather 1 John 2:15, 17. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Those are the three-prong attack that Satan will launch on every believer. And those three, if you match them up to the temptation Eve faced in the garden, it falls under one of those three. And so what was it? Remember, it was a fruit to be desired to make one wise. He knows, God knows, in the day you consume it, you'll be as gods, knowing good and evil. This lie of autonomy, the creature's autonomy apart from God, still perpetuates itself, and wealth enables that. That's why the more we have, you know what the danger is forgetting God. I've shared the testimony many times when my wife and I were first married. I delivered pizzas. I had a paper route of 500 papers, a motorized paper route. And I remember people, you know, it was a scam, really. I got to tell you, these circulation departments, they made money off of advertising. And they would tell these people, well, you know, we've got a circulation of 30,000. They probably had a circulation of 15,000, but they printed 30. So carriers like me would have leftover newspapers, and I thought, well, they haven't paid their bill. I might as well throw it to you because it's trashing my car up. It was amazing. So there were times our rent was $250 a month in a 3-bedroom farmhouse, and there were times we were short rent. And I can remember praying, God, we're really in need here, you know, for $250. And we would go to the mailbox, and literally the day it was due, there would be like a check in there for not only what we needed, but $30 or $40 more. And it was just such a blessing. And we would pray for that. I got to tell you, as God blessed, and as we grew and our income grew, I don't know that I really pray for the mortgage to be there anymore. You think about early in your life. Isn't it something how God blesses and we gain? We're not so careful to thank Him for it, right? The mortgage just comes out automatically. We got it set up on an auto plan. We don't even thank Him for it. But we're no longer praying because we have this need, because God has blessed us. Autonomy. There is this allure to autonomy, and we have to recognize we're God's. Somebody once said this, that money is a lousy lover. The more you love it, the less it satisfies. The more you focus on it, the less it delivers. And indeed it is. There's no satisfaction. Notice verse 11, spending. Spending. Now what do we mean? Certainly not spending money. Why do we have money? Why does God provide for us? So that we can spend, right? So that we can bless others. Okay, so it's not, so notice what kind of spending here in the text, verse 11. It says, when goods increase, they are increased that eat them. In other words, the wealthy person's dependents tend to grow. Friends come out of the woodwork. Have you ever heard of people, they win the lottery and all of a sudden, hey bro, right? You know, the wealthy has many friends. Long lost friends. Money attracts people to us. But there's also something it says, and what good is there to the owners thereof, saving the beholding of them with their eyes. So not only does it attract people who want the goodies from us, but also the more we have, the more is required for people to actually care for that wealth. You know, there are accountants and bookkeepers and people that have charge of all that we have. Real friends are hard to come by to the wealthy. The wealthy struggle oftentimes to have authentic relationships. How sad. There are people, I know people, relatives in industries, service industries, where they have clients who are very wealthy. And they hang around and will talk because it's refreshing to them to have somebody that doesn't seem to be their friend simply because of how much is in their bank account. That's sad. That's sad. By the way, it's also a reminder to us, oftentimes ministries, and mind you, rightly so, ministries are often geared to the down and out. But we have to recognize there are people that have means that need Jesus Christ. There are people at the country club are some of the saddest, most miserable people you'll ever meet. They need Jesus Christ too. And for many of those people, no one's ever approached him. Why? Because he's got everything. He's got the nice car. He won't listen to me. We got to remember those things. Remember it says 1 Corinthians chapter 1, not many wise, not many noble are called. Doesn't say not any. It says not many. And so it is hard for a rich man to enter into heaven. Why? He's got everything. But remember in that parable, remember he says with God, it's not impossible. God saves wealthy people too. So spending. Notice another problem with money. Verse 12, anxiety. Anxiety. It says, the sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he little or much. It's not speaking to the fact that a wealthy man doesn't labor, but here it's juxtapositioning a wealthy individual with somebody laboring by the sweat of their brow. In other words, there is much grief and much possessions. Look at the rest of the verse. But the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep. Henry Ford said he was happier when he had a mechanic's job. J.D. Rockefeller, at 53 years old, was the world's only billionaire, making $1 million a week. And they said he lived on crackers and milk, and he couldn't sleep because of the worry he had over his possessions. And something happened. We don't know, but he started to give his money away, and his health improved radically, and he lived to celebrate his 98th birthday. Anxiety. Some people are constantly worried about their money or their things. I've often joked when I go to Walmart. I've never had a collector's car. I've owned 3 Toyota Siennas. I know you'll consider those collector's items. I do. But they're in the boneyard. 2 of them are now. But I've never had a car where I had to park 100 yards out in the middle of the Walmart parking lot so somebody wouldn't breathe on it. Usually when I park next to you, I'm like, go ahead and hit it. Trust me, it'll do more damage to you than it will to this, you know. Never had that problem. But I know people that do. You know, there are people that they literally, they have so many nice things, and those things tend to have a controlling influence over their lives. Great anxiety. Notice verses 13 and 14. Another problem with money is hoarding. There is a sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely riches kept for the owners thereof to their hurt. Selfish greed, we're told, hurts the hoarder. Now this isn't responsible saving. This is selfish greed and hoarding. Verse 14. But those riches perish by evil travail or by misfortune. And then what happens? And he begetteth a son, and there is nothing in his hand. So verse 14 indicates that a selfish hoarder, someone who is full of greed and hoards to themselves, oftentimes can be given to bad business decisions, hence the misfortune, blinded by their greed and lose all in an instant. And then they have nothing to leave for those of their loved ones. Hoarding. Notice verses 15 and 17. Another problem with money, leaving it. Verse 15. As he came forth of his mother's womb, naked shall he return to go as he came, and shall take nothing of his labor which he may carry away in his hand. We leave this world with nothing. Remember Job chapter 1. It was a relentless attack from Satan on Job. And he says, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's why in Matthew chapter 6, remember what Jesus says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth. The Greek in that text is a tense that indicates that it was something they could have been in the process of and needed to stop. Stop laying up treasures on earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt and where thieves break through and steal. But rather lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. So as some person said, we can't take it with us, but we can send it forward. We can lay up treasure in heaven where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt. It tells us it's an inheritance, incorruptible, undefiled, and that fadeth not away, reserved in heaven for us in 1 Peter. Verse 16, it says, and this also is a sore evil, that in all points as he came, so he shall go. And what profit hath he that hath labored for the wind? So from an earthly perspective, the labor that we undertake here is for naught. It's for the wind. You have all these possessions and a memorial service, all these things to characterize the individual's life. They don't care about it. They don't care. Yeah, I remember this person. I remember this about him and that about him. But nothing he labored for means anything if he knew not Jesus Christ. So we recognize that from an earthly perspective. Look in verse 17. All his days also he eateth in darkness, and he hath much sorrow and wrath in his sickness. There are dark days as our earthly lives come to a close. There are people that have millions of dollars and they're in nursing homes, and all of their fake friends are gone. There's nobody there. There's somebody making minimum wage, bringing them a tray to eat off of. That's sad. But that's life in a fallen world. Andrew Carnegie said this, millionaires seldom smile. Kind of sad, isn't it? Read this story about an industrialist seen an old man fishing. And he come along and he asked him why, his pole was set next to him. He's just sitting at the side of a pond. He said, what are you doing? He said, well, I've caught enough fish, caught all the fish I need for today. And he said, but don't you understand that you ought to catch more fish? He says, why? He says, well, if you catch more fish, you can sell them. You could buy a boat. You could buy this. You could buy that. Then you could have all this stuff to sell to do really what you want to do. And the fisherman looks at him and says, you mean like I'm doing now? A lot of grief there, a lot of busyness. It is far better to be laboring for the world to come. It's very easy for people to look at possessions and material things as in and of themselves being evil. I've had a lot of people, dear friends in my life, that God had blessed in the areas of business or finance, godly people. And these were people that leveraged what they had for the kingdom of God. And that's how God intends it. I mean, really, quite frankly, someone once said this, and I believe it, that few of God's people can be trusted with wealth. And I think it's based upon what it says there in Proverbs. Give me food convenient for me, lest I have too little and steal and take your name in vain, or else I have too much and forget all about God. And so, what's a proper perspective, this second point here? We've seen the problem of money under these various headings. Now what about a proper perspective? Just two of them. Number 1, verse 18, work is a gift. Behold, that which I have seen, it is good and comely or fitting for one to eat and to drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, that he taketh under the taketh his toil, taketh under the sun all the days of his life, which God giveth him, for it is his portion. Here we see that work is a gift. We have to recognize this. There's this mindset, and I'm sure it's been around. I think, I don't know that it was as prevalent when I was younger, and those of you who are older than myself can remember different times. Work kind of gets a black eye now, right? You ever hear, I can't wait to retire. I remember talking to my brother one time, and he's a truck driver, and driving on roads where an increasing number of people seem to have been lobotomized before they get behind the wheel is a very, very difficult job, and he becomes very frustrated. And I remember one time talking to him, and I kind of said something to him along these lines of like, he said something about so many years. I said, what, till retirement? He said, I don't want to rush that. He said, that's just closer to the grave. And it was surprising to me, because I'd never heard him say that. I'd always heard him talk about retirement. When I was in secular occupation at the city, guys would always talk about 8 more years, 7 more winters. Work is a gift. We were made to work. Remember, God made Adam, put him in a garden to dress and to keep it. But then when you go to the next chapter, we see that one of the results of the fall is that work became labor. The earth didn't yield its strength. It was thorns and thistles. And man would earn it by the sweat of his brow. Something happened to this idea of work because of the curse. We're made to work. We will work in eternity. We're not just going to have like these adult diapers playing harps on clouds, right? We're going to be doing something. How awesome is heaven? Think about this. We're going to do some kind of employment, some kind of work. We will never tire of whatever God's called us to do. It will be maximum enjoyment. And everybody will be enjoying everything God gives them to do. It's going to be so awesome. No sin. There's not going to be a guy that's hiding behind the thing over here, getting one over on the boss. It's not going to happen. It's going to be just amazing. What is God going to do? We're going to work in eternity. Why? Because work is an expression of worship. I worship God in how I work. I should be thankful for my job, for the ability to work. I know people that don't have jobs and they would love to have a job. They would love to be able to walk like you and me, or to labor like you and me. And there are so many able-bodied people bemoaning their existence because they have to work. Work is a gift from God. And the things that we gain from work is a gift. Which brings us to point number 2, this proper perspective, verses 19 and 20. Wealth is a gift. Verse 19, every man also to whom God hath given riches and wealth, and hath given him power to eat thereof, and to take his portion, and to rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. It's a gift to work, and to gain, and to have things. Verse 20, for he shall not much remember the days of his life. Now he's talking about all of these things before. He's talking about a perspective here. He'll not much remember the days of his life, because God answereth or keeps him busy in the joy of his heart. In other words, when we have the perspective that work and what we have are all gifts from God, God busies our hearts with joy. So that we're not looking at the brevity of life. We're not unduly under this cloud of gloom over the dark days that seem to sometimes plague us. God is working in our hearts and causing us to find the satisfaction in him. The ability to get and enjoy things is certainly a gift from God. What are some life points this evening? What are some life points? Number one, we are just stewards of all God has entrusted to us. Let us be faithful to him. Our time, our talents, our treasures, we hear this very often. These are all gifts. The people in our lives are gifts from God. They really are. Not just our family members, our neighbors, our friends, our brothers and sisters in Christ, in our church family. These are all gifts. They're God's provisions for us. We need to stop looking at life through this autonomous viewpoint. That life is about me and serving of me. But life is me under God as creator, as owner, as sovereign. And this man Joe is in my life. I get along with Joe. He's a friend. Well, that's a gift, certainly. But this guy over here, Rick's in my life, and Rick can't stand me for some reason. I don't know what I ever did to Rick. Okay? But he's God's provision too. In what way? Because God expects me to pray for my enemies, doesn't he? God calls me to love him. Why? Because God loved me when I was an enemy in my mind by wicked works. And from the cross he said, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they do. So learn, Matt. Rick is a gift from me to teach you how to be more like Jesus Christ. The people in our lives are all God's provision. What? To chase us to the cross. Everything is. I run to the cross, thanksgiving for God's gifts. I run to the cross when I have needs. I run to the cross praying for the people in my life and thanking God for them. God is the owner, and therefore, beloved, let us handle with care. Let us be those wise and faithful stewards. Secondly, we should leverage our lives and possessions for the glory of God and the good of others. Beloved, if you and I will have an upward look and an outward look, it will spare us a lot of heartache. This doesn't mean we cannot enjoy God's blessings in our lives, but it means we ought to have a godly balance and moderation to our lives. We ought to leverage the things we have to increase those relationships, to help others to enjoy all that God has called them to. Leverage our lives and possessions for his glory and the good of others. And you know what you're going to find? And we all know this. You know how we know this? Because as parents, we understand this. As having children, I told my children this. At the young adults, we went and did a scavenger hunt this last Sunday evening, and then we went to Indian's Pizza. And I was telling these young people, I said, you know, you learn as a parent. I remember when I was first married, this sounds kind of funny to you guys, but growing up in a house with other people there, and there'd be a cake, you may get like 1 or 2 pieces of that cake. Well, I remember when my wife and I first got married, we scrambled up some money, got a Duncan Hines mix. I told my wife, I said, make the whole cake, and I'm going to eat it. I want to eat the whole cake. You know, I like cake. And so she made this cake, and of course she ate some too, but it was nice because I wasn't having to, strategize on how to get in there before the brother got home, right? Well, then you become a parent. And what happens? Some cake left. There's you, and there's your children. What do? You send them to bed, tell them they've been bad, you take the cake. No, no, you don't do that. You know what you do? You see that piece of cake, and you know what? You know what I find myself doing? As much as I want that cake and as much as I need it, Not really. I take that cake and I will look at my two daughters. There's two pieces, and then there's me, and I'm like, go ahead, guys. We do this, don't we, as parents? Why do we do it? Because it gives us greater joy to give than to receive. And when we approach our possessions that way, when we approach things that way with a look to the glory of God and good of others, we're going to be better off. And then lastly, treasuring Christ is the surest way to guard our hearts against temptation. This is something we grow and we learn to do, to treasure Christ. So many young believers, those of us who have known Christ for years, we get it. Because I have a suspicion, you like myself, the greatest deterrent to you going off the rails is because you know the love of Christ for you and you love Him and He's been your dearest friend and you've learned to treasure Him over the years. As I treasure Christ, whether it's a temptation to greed or fill in the blank, if I treasure Jesus Christ, nothing can assail me. Nothing. Why? Because I am His and He is mine. That's why. Remember Jim Elliot? Remember his great saying? He is no fool to give what he cannot keep, to gain what he cannot lose. And Christ is a treasure, beloved, that we cannot lose, and He'll never lose us. Let's go to the Lord in prayer this evening. Father, thank You that behind a world of bells and whistles, a world that tries to allure us at every turn, that we know You, the author and finisher of our faith. And better is one day in Your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. And God, I know that my brothers and sisters in Christ, we would rather be doorkeepers in the house of our God than dwell in tents of wickedness. Thank You for loving us. Thank You for satisfying our souls, for being to us what only You could be, because no one else can satisfy, for never failing us, for never leaving us, for never forsaking us. Thank You for being our treasure. And God, help us to grow even in greater measure to understand all that You are and all that You do for us. Every moment of every day, may it be for Your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, for those of you joining us at home, may God bless you and have a wonderful week.